degrees where Tannenbaum is right now in Boca. And Adam Schefter, who had the huge story this weekend, the blockbuster trade. Let's get right to it. The first quarterback domino to fall in what promises to be a wild and crazy NFL offseason fell over this weekend, with Schefter reporting Saturday night that the Lions have traded quarterback Matthre Stafford to the Rams for Jared Goff and a whole bunch of draft picks. In addition to Goff, the Lions get a third-rounder this year, a number 1 next year, and a number 1 in 2023. So in short, they get 2 first-round picks and they get a starting quarterback. That's what the market was for Matthre Stafford. Here's Schefter. What more can you tell us about this blockbuster deal over the weekend?
Well, there was so much to it, Greeny. And when you look at it and break it down, in the end, ultimately, I think it comes down to this. The Lions were trying to work with Matthre Stafford. Matthre Stafford wanted to go to the Los Angeles Rams. That became his number 1 destination. And he voiced that to the Detroit Lions throughout the day on Saturday, letting it be known that he wanted to wind up in L.A. with Sean McVay. He didn't want to go to Carolina. He didn't want to go to Denver. He didn't want to go to Washington. He didn't want to go to Chicago. Nothing against any of those franchises. It was the lure of Sean McVay and Los Angeles that made him want to go play there. And in the end, the Lions needed the Rams to step up and make an offer that was as compelling, if not more compelling, than any of the other teams. And that's exactly what happened. Sean McVay called the team owner, Stan Kroenke, on Saturday afternoon, said, we need to increase and up our offer. And they talked with the general manager, Les Snead. They came up with the compensation. They went back to the Detroit Lions. And then later, as the day went on, and the Lions flushed it out with everybody else, the Lions and Rams were able to work out exactly what Matthre Stafford and Sean McVay wanted. That, to me, was the genesis of the deal. These 2 individuals wanting to come together to work together in L.A. next season. And I think everybody saw how last season unfolded with Jared Goff. Sean McVay wanted a new quarterback. It was no secret they were going to make a bold move. And there you see the terms of the trade that had reverberations in many ways around the NFL.
It's remarkable when you think about it. 2 years ago this week, we were kicking off a Super Week in which Jared Goff and the Rams were in the Super Bowl, and now he's a Detroit Lion. So we'll unpack all of that in a minute. Let me go to you, though, quickly on this. How does this then, oh, wait, let me go back to Schefter really quick, Cindy. I'm sorry, I may have fooled you with that. Thank you. But I had one more question for Schefter, and that is, what does this mean for the rest of the dominoes? We're waiting for a lot of other moves, namely Deshaun Watson. How should we expect this Stafford deal to impact that?
I don't think this move impacts Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is going to go for a haul if the Houston Texans come to the realization that they're going to trade him. Now, if there are other teams out there that would consider trading their quarterbacks, whether that's the Philadelphia Eagles and Carson Wentz, or the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo, or you come up with the team and the quarterback. If any of those teams are willing to make a move, certainly they're going to refer to this trade as a sort of benchmark. Look, Jared Goff was in the same draft class as Carson Wentz. And so that may provide some clarity there. But Deshaun Watson is in his own category. And if the Texans come to that point, they will do it because they are blown away with an offer that is separate from the one that the Rams made to the Lions this weekend.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. Schefter, thank you. And you're staying with me here, so we will get much more from you as we go. Now, let me bring in the rest of the crew here, and let me start, Ryan Clark, with you as we go. What does this make the Rams? As of this minute, with Matthre Stafford as their quarterback, what are the Los Angeles Rams next year?
The Rams are absolutely a contender. I don't think this makes the Rams the front runners. I wouldn't go out and put $100 million on them to win it, but this makes them a true contender in the NFC. And even with all they had on defense, with the run game, with Sean McVay, I don't necessarily know if they were a true contender with Jared Goff. And that's crazy to say because this is a guy who brought you to a Super Bowl. But clearly, this was a relationship between Sean McVay and Jared Goff that could not be repaired. This was a relationship that had run its course, and they were willing to give the Detroit Lions not only a great haul to get Matthre Stafford, but I believe a great haul to take Jared Goff and that contract off of their hands. And now, if you are the Los Angeles Rams, you have to say, we have to win the championships. You acquire first-round draft picks, and you would get as many as you possibly can in hopes of getting Pro Bowl caliber players. They've went the opposite way. They say they're going to use those picks to trade for proven commodities. Now you have those commodities. If you don't win this thing in the next 2 or 3 years, you made the wrong decision. So this is all about execution now that you have these pieces.
So, Dan Orlovsky, and just to remind anyone who doesn't already know, you played with Stafford for years. It's well known how close you are to him. What do you think he is there, and what do you think the Rams are this minute?
He's the missing piece to go chase that championship that RC was referencing. He's the guy that puts them over the top. He's the quarterback that takes them from good to great. This is a no-brainer move for the Los Angeles Rams. Like, this is their window. This has been trending towards being their window. They are not building a program for the future. They are in win mode, win now mode right now. And it upgrades a lot of talent on their offense. When you're talking about a quarterback at that position that, okay, first of all, can you upgrade in your drop back passing game where it's like, you know, you see the window and you could drive it in there to get those chunk passes. That's perfect. When you have the opportunity to upgrade your drop back passing game, that's a huge part of this. Can you get that arm talent that guys can do things that only he can? That's a big part of this, Greeny. And so they're in win now mode right now. This is a team that's up at the top with Green Bay and Tampa Bay now for a Super Bowl.
You know, he's 32 years old. He'll be 33 next week, so still plenty of time for a full-fledged second act. He's never had a good defense, really, in Detroit for the most part. They've never had a running game, so he gets a lot of things at his disposal. But, Mike T., you were making the point this morning as a general manager that there was a lot of pressure that comes with this move. On whom?
On the LA Rams front office, they have zero margin for error. It's reckless and irresponsible to go 8 years without a first-round pick. You have great core players, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, but if any of them get hurt, it's over. And I'm not so sure I even agree with Dan that when you look at the skill players from Detroit in 2020, like Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, and going to Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, that's even that much better. And then when you layer on top of that you have to keep good young players like Josh Johnson, Troy Hill, Leonard Floyd, you have a very small window with no margin for error. So I think this is a really risky move. I don't know if they're better than Tampa. I don't know better if they're than Green Bay. So I understand why they did it. And the other concern I would have, if I was a GM, I would say to Sean McVay, hey, look, on September 6, 2019, we gave Jared Goff a record guarantee over $100 million, and you said we could win a championship with him. So we're going to make this trade reluctantly. But what happened? Why, as a coach, and you're a great coach, you loved him a year and a half ago, and now we can't win with him. So we're going to put all our chips in the middle of the table. We're going to have a really good team. I don't know if it's a great team, and we have no margin for error over the next 2 years.
A lot there to react to. Go ahead, Dan.
Listen, we're talking like America. You know what I love, Greeny? America's going to see how great of a player Matthew Stafford is. Like, I disagree with Mike T when it comes to just like talking about the skill players. This is a guy that has had a top 10 defense once in his career. He went 11-5 that year. The Rams are a top 10 defense. This is a guy over the last 6 years, his team averaged 89 yards per game running the football. The Rams averaged 126 yards on the ground last year. This is a guy that in 12 seasons in Detroit had a 100-yard back 12 times. Do the math, folks. That's one a year. The Rams have done more than that in the last 3 seasons. We've never seen Matthew Stafford in this kind of environment. We've never seen Matthew Stafford with these skill players, this run game, this kind of offensive line, this scheme fit with Sean McVay in a top 10 defense. This is a guy that every player says, like, yo, that dude's really good. And everyone's going to go, well, he hasn't won in the playoffs. We've never seen him with this kind of competent team around him. The reality is both he and the Rams have chose to try and choke on greatness rather than nibble on mediocrity. And RC's right. They got to go win a Super Bowl. But at least they're taking their swing at it. This is a no-brainer for the Rams.
I like that phrase. I like the nibbling on mediocrity. RC, I think it could be phrased this way. Tell me if this is reasonable. We have long thought Matt Stafford might be a great player, and he was just in a bad situation. Now we're going to find out, right? It's going to be now or never for Matthew Stafford in L.A.
Yeah, 100%. We have two different things here, right? The reason this trade happened is we had a quarterback that gave up on his organization, and we had an organization that gave up on their quarterback. And that's how we got this marriage. That's how we got this trade. But even Aaron Rodgers early on this year, when speaking about quarterbacks that can do special things, he brought up Matthre Stafford, and he just called him number 9. Darius Slay Jr. often talks about how great he believes Matthre Stafford is. I was thinking earlier this morning about the Detroit Lions as a whole, and I don't necessarily put Matthre Stafford with these two guys as far as their position, but they had Barry Sanders, who's my favorite running back of all time, I believe the best to ever do it, and they had Calvin Johnson, who was the best I'd ever seen, who best I ever lined up against, and these dudes didn't win playoff games. These dudes don't have highlights that we can run this week for Super Bowl, and they're two of the best to ever live. And Matthew Stafford is really talented. Matthew Stafford is a guy that they decided to pick number 1 overall. And we have seen flashes. Now he gets his opportunity. Now he gets a chance to write a legacy. And I think it was the perception of Matthew Stafford, right? Us understanding the arm talent, us understanding the measurables, the Los Angeles Rams understanding those things that said, you know what?